My name is Sarah Manski. I was a candidate for school board in Madison, Wisconsin, endorsed by the Green Party there, but also by a local progressive political party called Progressive Dane. And the district I was running in was relatively large, 253,000 people. And in a three-way primary, I received 45% of the vote, so I won that primary. Right? And so as Green Party candidates, we want to win, right? We want to say our message, but we also want to win. If you want to win, you have to have a scientific, well-planned, very organized campaign. And so that's what I'm going to stress to you right now. So out of this campaign school, I want you to get not necessarily a written campaign plan, but I really want to stress that you have one before you even announce that you're going to run. I want you to do as much pre-planning and work as possible before you ever announce that you're going to run. Then as a candidate, you can just execute this plan instead of scrambling to figure out what you're going to do every day. You have to have a solid campaign team, a clear message, good budget and fundraising program, which we're going to stress here. Expansive voter contacts, time management skills, and that you leave with a plan. Okay, so raising money is all about having a plan, and to have a plan, you have to have a budget. Now, how do you figure out how much you need to raise? Thoughts? How would you, if you were going to run for, who's run for something? Okay, how much did you need to raise? $7 million. What about you, Mike?
I needed to personally raise about 40, and I had to be part of slates that raised about another 100 to 150.
Okay, all right. In my school board race, to win, I had to raise a minimum of $10,000. To really win and make sure I was winning, I had to raise $20,000. Now, it's going to vary depending on a number of things, and so that's important. The way to figure it out is to figure out how to get to 52% of the vote. And in this slideshow, I have a little chart here to show you how to do that. Okay, so you have to figure out first your expected vote. This is the number that you calculate how many people are coming out and voting, right? So even though in my district it was 253,000, only 10,000 people actually bothered to vote in a spring primary, right? So you do that by looking at past elections and figuring out, okay, I take the last three similarly situated elections, and I average those and divide by 3, and I'll figure out how many people are going to come out and vote in that election. So that's very important to have good numbers. And then you average that result. And then how many votes do you need to win? Well, that's, of course, 50% plus 1 in a winner-take-all system. But you want to have a comfortable margin. So maybe the Green Party wants to have more than 52% because of irregularities in the voting machines and things like that. Maybe you want to actually make sure that you have 55% of the vote instead of 52. So who are your voters, right? You want to figure out people who always vote, people who sometimes vote, and people who never vote, okay? And in political campaigns, you have to be really, really harsh with your time as a candidate and say, I am not going to talk to anybody who doesn't vote, because you only have a limited amount of time, and usually we're dealing with a much larger population of people than we can ever possibly talk to. So we want to make sure we're talking to voters. So what happens if that's too many people, like 10,000 people, and you have 2 months, or millions of people, right? So if your voter universe is too big, you have to be very kind of scientific about where you're going to spend your time. You can go and focus on your neighborhood. I don't know exactly how the voter file looks in California, but in Wisconsin we can get lists that actually show name, address, voting history, and you can make sure when you're going door to door or calling people on the phone that you're only talking to people who vote always, every election. Otherwise, you may have to just go to areas that are high voting areas that are progressive. Focus where you have friends. You can go through your voter list and make sure that you are actually talking to voters. You want to prioritize by ward. Student wards, unfortunately, in Wisconsin don't necessarily turn out to vote, especially in a spring primary. It's all different, but students can be a great asset to you and certainly a supply of volunteers. Okay, so you want to have a plan for sure and write it down. So back over here, once you've figured out your voter number, so for me it was about 5,000 just to win because it was a three-way primary. You want to figure out, okay, so what's my calendar look like? And before you even start campaigning, if you know you have 3 months, you can get your calendar out and put out all the events, all the forums. You can put all your emails that you're going to send out on there. You can put the time the candidate's going to spend making phone calls on there. And the Get Out the Vote or Go TV, which is going to be the weekend before the election, which is like all hands on deck, everybody out. You want to assign the roles first. Your campaign manager, most important person in the campaign. Who's going to do the website? You can have your website even done before you start campaigning. Who's going to send out these emails? Emails are incredibly important for fundraising. You cannot underestimate how much money you can raise through the web. It's incredible, and it's actually the easiest way to raise money. So your email person is going to be really important. You want to have a nice website. Your website should look better than your opponent's. And that's relatively inexpensive, so you have to have a nice website. You have to send out nice emails. 2 times a week at minimum. The candidate should not be doing this, ever. So you want to really have faith and trust in your email person that they are going to follow the rules, going to be on top of that, and going to actually send out these emails. You have to have great candidate photos for your emails. Have your photos done before you start campaigning. Make sure they're quality. Make sure you are, you don't want to have a photo where you're in a winter jacket. I saw that in the last campaign. One of my opponents had a photo. They're outside. They look cold. You want to be with friends, with family, pleasant photos where people think, oh, I connect with that person, right? So you want to get all those photos beforehand. If you're running for school board and you're a teacher, you want to have photos where you're at a board teaching. If you're running for something else that's profession specific, you want to have photos like that. Definitely consistent messaging. And Ben and I will be talking about how to do messaging later. He's great at that. Once you have a message, it better be great in the beginning because you should not change it at all throughout the campaign. Because you're talking to voters and they're going to hear you through various forms of media several times. If you change your message, you're going to confuse the voter. When you give your message, it'll be pretty much the same 2 to 10 minutes over and over and over and over and over again. And you'll feel like you're just a broken record, but that's good. Having a message that's always bouncing around means you're probably not going to win that race. Mitt Romney coming out with a new message every week, that was killer for his campaign. Every email should have a link to your website, link to the donate page right in the top button, donate. Links to your social media, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. You also, as a candidate, should not be doing your Facebook page or your Twitter page. Back to, that doesn't really get you money or votes, right? You don't know you're talking to voters when you're replying to messages on Facebook. Candidate phones, this is crucial for raising money. So this raises a lot of money. This is harder for candidates to do, but you have to do it. Once you've figured out your budget, like, okay, I need to raise $10,000 a week for 4 weeks, you can break it down by how many hours do I as a candidate have to be on the phone and how much do I have to raise per hour. And if you know, okay, I have to raise $100 an hour, you're going to make more phone calls if you didn't hit that number, right? You know, of course, first you call your friends and your family, and then you call people who are Green Party members, and then you call people who have worked with you in the past in various organizations. You kind of go, that universe of familiarity, you move out. And then you start to call through the voter file, because then you're talking to voters and you're asking for money, right? And if people donate to you, they're definitely going to vote for you. So absolutely you have to do this. I think you should be very strict about this. And as a candidate, you're not going to want to do this. So one of the roles is the vote or the phone buddy. That's a crucial role in the campaign. It's the person who's going to sit with you and make phone calls for 2 hours every day. So it should be somebody you want to hang out with, somebody who you will actually listen to when they say you actually have to be on the phones. And house parties, and sometimes, you know, unions will donate to you if the other candidate's very conservative. Be careful with house parties, because people are going to want to throw them for you, and I've found that if they're taking away from your phoning hours, you're not probably going to raise as much at a house party as you would if you were just calling voters throughout the hours that you would have been at the party. So, so anyway, that's that. And I can pass around some of my lit to give you a sense of what I'm talking about here. And I'm going to let Jill, you want to take over? Or okay, thanks. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
I had a question. The district I'm in has it's a city college district, and it has 2 different groups of voters in it. It's got kind of the more conservative, you know, kind of more white voters, and then it has a whole area of African American and poor voters. And there's real bad cutbacks at that college.
Right.
The one end of the district, the northern end of the district, is going to be affected because their children aren't going to be able to use the programs that are being cut back. And on the other hand, the people in my neighborhood have voted for all sorts of bond issues, so they're getting shortchanged on that. So there's almost 2 different messages. So
Sure.
For 2 different places. So
How
do you deal with that kind of stuff?
I think your core message should always stay the same. Now you can add, depending on whether you're talking to younger voters or older voters, or if there's a particular issue. For Greens, the core message is almost always going to be an anti-austerity, pro-democracy message. And if that is your message, you could talk to pretty much anybody, and they are going to, you know, agree with you, right? Because everybody, almost all Americans believe in their heart that democracy is something we aspire to. And depending on where you're running, it could be a tax the rich message. It could be, I would say it should be a pro rather than an anti message. So frame it in a positive light. And often I think progressive candidates are afraid of having language that seems a little outside of the mainstream. And as long as you don't sound ideologically jargonistic, you know, kind of, people respond to that because it's something they already believe. If you're talking about things that the other candidates aren't talking about, as Jill often does, people really resonated with that message. So, do you want to take over? Okay.
Thank you. And thanks, Sarah. That was really great. I feel like Sarah did the hard part. Now I have the easy part. And I mean, the hard part is just sort of like covering what the plan is and sort of what's the overview of fundraising. So I'm going to go back and just focus in on sort of the candidates' responsibility in the fundraising universe, because.
Sorry, I just turned that off so it wasn't in.
Oh, okay. All right, great. It really is a team thing, and you appreciate that once you get into a campaign. It's really not all about the candidate. The candidate is just kind of the spokesperson, and you have special responsibilities to, to meet people, to talk to people, to connect. Campaigns are really all about human connections, and the candidate gives that vision and that agenda a human face and kind of a human storyline. And that's your job, is to make connections to people and to help them see themselves in your campaign. But in terms of the campaign itself, you have a job to do, and that's to connect with people. And if you have a team, it's much easier for you to do that job. Like Sarah was saying, you need somebody else to write those emails for you. If you're writing them yourself, then you're not doing the job you need to do as a candidate. If you are writing up your position statements and all that, if you're doing that yourself, it will be a very tough campaign. Now, sometimes you have to run a campaign in order to build a team for your next run. So, it's really important to see the campaign as a process of growth, and as, it is a moving target. You can't do everything at once. You got to start somewhere, and you start with whatever resources and whatever team you can put together. When I first started out in my first run, which was for governor in Massachusetts in 2002, I had dedicated help from sort of a campaign, what was he? Chairperson, really. And he was great at policy and analysis and writing things, but, didn't know anything else about campaign strategy and stuff. He was good at messaging, but was not a campaign manager, didn't actually know how to run a campaign. And in fact, this is one of the biggest challenges that Greens have had, is finding people to come in and be your campaign manager so you don't wind up acting as a campaign manager yourself, because it will cut you down by somewhere between 50 to 80% in terms of what you can do as a candidate. So I'm just really curious to hear from people, if you intend to run and what you intend to run. Let's see, I'm getting a signal here. Oh, yeah, to move something over, I guess, a background. Yeah, for the cameras. I'm just really curious to hear from people so I can maybe frame my remarks a little more directly to the kinds of campaigns that you're interested in.
Well, I'm Laura Wells. I ran for governor of California, which is like a country itself. So my question, but you ran for president of this huge United States of America. And so my question is, ideally, you'd get the team together face to face, but the reality is,
great.
So I have a question about how in the world you did that. I know that the Manskis are in Wisconsin. You're in Illinois. Did you do Skype? Did you do
Great.
email? Did you do phone conferencing? Did you do face to face? How often? That kind of thing.
Great, cool. All right, we'll come back to that. Yeah, and I'm interested, if you have a question at this point, you can shout it out, but I'm also especially interested to know what's the scope of your campaign. Are you looking at a school board race or a city council and, et cetera? Others? Yeah.
My name is Mike Pelton. I ran for Congress in the 30th District in the San Fernando Valley.
Great.
And I wanted to ask you, I think the Greens have a lot of, policies that would be considered socialistic. And I didn't have a problem if somebody would say that in a kind of a red baiting way. And I think it's probably better because, if you start denying it, then you end up, people call you that anyway. So, because you were talking about the use of that kind of
Great.
rhetoric, as long as you don't sound
Great.
doctrinaire.
I got your point. Great. I'm going to just keep it really short at this point, mostly to just hear what kinds of campaigns you are thinking of. Others? Yeah?
Yeah, I filed for the Secretary of State race in 2014, and the goal is I've got to try to reach 1.5 million people to get them on board so I make it through the top 2 primary. That's the whole plan. I got to come in second.
Tall order. Yeah, tough. Others?
1.5 million people.
Ooh. Others considering running? Possibly?
Yeah, later in the future, like
Yeah.
mayor for a city, most
Cool.
likely LA.
Yeah. Oh, exciting. All right, great. It's good to start early. That's awesome. Okay, so. Yeah.
Very small, neighborhood council,
Neighborhood council. Great. What city, Kathy?
LA.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Yeah.
I've been asked so many things to be county, like London mayor or city council, mention, school board, county supervisor.
Great. Excellent. Okay. Terrific. Yeah, back here.
I ran this time last year for city council. I may run next year, but unless I get something more interesting to run for.
Yeah. What city?
City of Whittier.
Wonderful. Whittier. Okay, great. Yeah.
I think I already said I'm going to run for the Board of Trustees of Long Beach City College.
Excellent.
There's about 10, I think there's about 10,000 voters. in the whole
Amazing.
country.
Wow. Great. Yeah. Others? Okay.
Well, I didn't mention, I'm running for state controller in 2014.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Follow the money.
Woohoo, yeah, really. All right, that's exciting, and it's a broad spectrum. So I'm just going to say, a few basics first to give you some idea about fundraising from the point of view of a candidate. And as a candidate, your main job is to connect humanly with people. And for me, the message of the campaign is really critical, and you want it to infuse basically everything that you say. Don't let yourself get caught talking techno speak, about things. You want your message to be there all the time. And, for me, the message is about, reclaiming our democracy, and reclaiming a form of governance that belongs to us and therefore is just sustainable and peaceful. Yeah.
How long did it take you to get that message? Like, did you get it this campaign, or did it develop from pieces of previous?
Yeah, I'd say for me the message really hasn't changed. You sort of reframe it. So I ran for state legislature in 2006, and at that point it was building strong communities. But it was also about taking back our democracy. The message sort of came together for me as a gubernatorial candidate, and it was just really clear that we had just lost campaign finance reform. We had passed it, and then the legislature had repealed it. And it was clear that, our democracy had been hijacked, and we needed to reclaim our democracy and the peaceful, just, green future, which is sort of, how I put it together. And I haven't been able to lose that message ever since, because you begin to see how all these things really fit together. If you're running a race like for school board, it doesn't exactly make sense to be talking about, global peace and justice. But, you may want to focus more on building strong communities and a strong school system that you deserve, and taking back, the community's control over this vital institution, which is being privatized right out from under us. So you can sort of infuse a bigger message into smaller packages. That package might be school board, or it might be your county council, but there are very big issues that have intruded on our communities. And those very big issues are, whether our students have an education system that is supporting them, that's actually teaching for lifetime learning. The whole student, the whole person, as opposed to teaching to a test, and making education overly technical and sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and judging teachers, for example, according to standardized tests as well. And so infusing your message into your communications, especially when you're doing fundraising, is really important. And
Can I add something?
yeah, sure.
So what you were just referring to, what Ben always calls corporatization, taking local control away and giving it to the hands of private corporations. And that is true with public schools, that's true with our healthcare system, that's true with transportation. So I think that really resonates with people when you say that, look, things that used to be under public control are now being privatized or corporatized, really, because privatized almost sounds like a good thing sometimes. Private property, anyway, it's a longer debate, but I usually say corporatized instead of privatized. The other thing about messaging that's so important is that you look the part, okay? And you must always be as well dressed as the other candidates. So if they show up to forums in suits and ties, you should too. And you want the voter to think that if you're elected, you actually can take office and serve. So that means that you mentally believe you're going to win and act like you're going to win. And every time you talk to people, the media, whoever, you convey this message of confidence, strength, and you will feel that way if you have a very organized campaign. If you don't have an organized campaign, you'll feel flustered and you look flustered, and that will come across to people.
Well said. Thanks, Sarah. Couple other just basics that I want to have gotten through and get them behind us. On the plan, it's really important to have that plan not only for your campaign, but also a fundraising plan. And by the way, to have a campaign manager who will not only write the plan, but who will walk you through the plan. Because your job as a candidate, again, is to be so oriented to the people you're with, to whoever is in the room, that you're not worrying about the plan. You're just worrying about making a connection and connecting to the crisis that person is dealing with. Whether it's the crisis that their kid is having in school, or it's that, their home may be foreclosed on them, or that their kids don't have jobs and they're all, living at home and it's hard to get food on the table, or that the kids are off in Afghanistan, or that people are out on the picket lines for whatever. Most people are dealing with crisis these days. If you can connect with the people who are in crisis, you've won your election. Unless you're running, in a really upscale district where Greens aren't likely to be running. If you're running where Greens live, you want to be connecting with the crisis out there and not having to worry about the details. That is your campaign manager's problem. Your problem is the problem that everybody has in the room. And if you're conveying that you're there to help mobilize the solutions to that problem, that you have a good handle on the solutions, not you alone, but that we together have a good handle on those solutions, and you're here to help fight for those solutions, and that you're establishing a real bond with the people in the room and showing that you understand those solutions, and you understand those critical problems. That's why you are running. That's really good for your campaign, and it's also really good for your fundraising. A lot of people are, what shall we say, really worried about where we're going right now. More and more people are worried about where we're going. Pick your issue. Some people have the time to put into it, and they will volunteer for your campaign. They'll be part of the team. People who have jobs, especially well-paying jobs, will not have the time, but they will have the money. So you want to be connecting with them at a really gut level too. And what I do is write the message down. So I've got my key phrases right there in front of me. And when I make those calls, I'm really riveted on those key phrases. And I know about how long it will take to run through the pitch. And we'll come back to the pitch in a minute. And I want to mention also that be sure you write stuff down when you're talking to, when you're making fundraising phone calls. You want to think of it as community building phone calls. At least that's how I do. That's my approach in fundraising. And I actually got my start on fundraising through Marnie Glickman, who's not here today, but who really taught me pretty much everything I know about fundraising. And I went through my rap for her. This was back in my governor's race. And, she said, go through your rap. I went through my rap. And then she said, well, you did a really good job, but you didn't ask me anything about me. And the light bulb went off in my head that, it's about connecting with a donor. And that's what, above all, I really learned from Marnie is that the donor needs to feel good about donating. And it's not just to you with your campaign, but it's how your campaign connects with their causes. So I started my, taking notes in my database for every donor. And I've used basically that database, which has grown over the years. And I now have lots of really personal relationships with lots of people that some of whom I've never met, but you become like their surrogate in a way. You represent the part of your donor that they can't do. They can't get out and be an activist right now. They can't run for office, and they're glad to have you doing it. So if you know something about them, like what they really care about, or who's sick in their family, or how their kids are struggling to get into college, and the way that I ask this is to say, what among these issues, and I don't open with that. I open with sort of the more routine campaign pitch, but then I make an opening and say, what, are there issues that, really connect with you in this race? I know there's so many things to be concerned about these days. Are there things that, that are highest on the list of priorities for you? And sometimes people, they just want to get off the phone, and that's fine. But an open-ended question like that gives them the chance to weigh in if they want. And they'll tell you, gee, my wife has been struggling with MS, can't afford her medications, our health care, doesn't cover everything, or I just lost my job and we don't have any health care, whatever it is. These issues that people are fighting, they'll tell you about them. And it is helpful, I find, to connect with your donor when you make the call. And Sarah made the point about how your overarching message doesn't change, but you may want to focus in more on one particular area, knowing that somebody is really a dedicated peace activist, for example, or a healthcare, a Medicare for All activist. It'll help you focus in on what really matters to them. Record keeping, important. Thank you notes, of course, really important, and thank you calls. One of our best donors to the campaign just came out of nowhere and made a large donation, and I called him up to thank him. And, in the process, he became a really dedicated donor to the campaign because we had one of those, bonding conversations. And the bonding conversation, in my experience, sort of has two ingredients to it. One is that you give your message. You give your message about why this is a breakthrough moment, for the cause, for building this movement, why this is a breakthrough moment and why this is a breakthrough campaign right here and now, why Laura's campaign for auditor is a breakthrough campaign, in a state that, has an incredibly progressive constituency, but tends to get very afraid of, standing up for what it wants. An auditor's job, is not only really critical, but it's where people are willing to take risks. And, supporters are very excited by the possibility of a breakthrough. They're very excited about the key gut issues for us, which are, democracy, peace, justice, sustainability, etc. You want to have your message, convey the gut issues, why this is a breakthrough moment, why this will be a really important step forward for the party and for the movement, again, depending on who you're talking to. Party people are your best supporters, but often there are people at the margins of the party. They're not Greens or not yet Greens, but they may become Greens in the course of your campaign. And if they're not Greens, they at least get what the movement is about. So you can frame your message in those terms, and if it has that breakthrough capacity, and then you get to the, how it relates to you, that is the personal part of the connection. That is that bonding conversation. And once you've had it with your donors, they will be there to support your cause. And it's not like you have to have a headliner campaign to get people really interested. People are very interested in the local races that build power at the level of our communities, especially in low-income communities and communities of color that are fighting, all the incredible burdens that so converge on low-income and communities of color. So in many ways, you have incredible capacity to fund those races. We recently put out a pitch for a candidate on the south side of Chicago for Congress who was running in a special election for Jesse Jackson Jr.'s seat. And it was such an exciting race because the Democrat, at that point, the leading Democrat was not a person of color, running in a district which was almost entirely of color. She was a supporter of gun rights in a community absolutely racked by gun violence. And we just assembled some of those facts and put out an email. I spent one day mostly leaving messages on phone machines of some of our donors, and we generated, some $5,000 or $10,000 in the course of a day for this little campaign that wasn't going to win, but was going to be a really important step forward for building the movement and for bringing together people in new constituencies, especially in a formerly Democratic machine district, to help it break away. People were so excited about that. And I was really so gratified to see that even leaving a phone message, which I have to admit I do, it's not a great idea when you're fundraising to leave phone pitches, message. I don't know if you do that, but out of desperation, I began to do that in the last race because there just wasn't time to call people back. It was really once. So I started leaving messages, and I found that if you had your message written out, if it's going to be recorded, you really want it to flow smoothly. You don't want to be searching for your words on that 30-second tape recording. So you really want it written out, and you really want to practice reading it so it sounds real. It doesn't sound, like you're reading it off the page. I found that it really began to work. One other thing, excuse me, that I want to mention is that unanticipated events can be huge, especially if you are being treated unfairly. So one of the biggest benefits for us was when we got locked out of a debate because we hadn't raised $100,000. At that point, we had brought in like $25,000. This was in our last governor's race. And the Globe said, well, sorry, you're not going to be in our debate because we only deal with real campaigns, that bring in the big money. So that was like, please throw us into the briar patch, you know. And so we got out the email blast that we needed to raise $100,000 in order to get into the debate. People were outraged about it. And within about 2 weeks, we had raised $100,000. So when you're being slapped around, it's really great for fundraising. Or if you get arrested, it's also very good for fundraising too. Not that, excuse me, not that you want to do it on that account, but if you have a good reason to be arrested and you get arrested, it will come back to support you in an odd way.
Jill, you said there were 2 parts to the bonding message.
Yes.
Did I miss?
Okay. Yeah. So the key thing was your message, in a kind of a gut connecting way, and the second part was connecting to the donor. The binding conversation really needs to have room for them. So I find that if I've had a chance to really tell people about why this is a breakthrough campaign, and then I have a chance to let them talk about why they're really upset, you know, about what's going on politically, that is magical. If they have been moved to the point where they want to say why this really matters to them, then you are connected, you know, in a way that will last you. I mean, for me, these are like relationships that you build up, and then after a while, all you got to do is send out that email, and they will donate. Okay, so.
Do you want to rest your voice for a minute? Or
No, that's all right. I'll just.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Let's see. Yeah, if there's water, that's great. I just got over like a 2-week cold or so that's just the hangover. Quickly on the questions, and then we can open it up, about how do you deal with a really big campaign team? Yeah. I think, you know, all the tools that we have nowadays, so if you can do a, whatever it's called, Google Plus, where you can all get into a video chat room, that's great. Or if you can do a group Skype, that's great. Often it's just a group phone call, and sometimes it's just the campaign manager who has to connect with everybody. It's problematic. In the last campaign, our team was not local at all. And, you know, it was very much an out-of-state thing. So I know what it must feel like to try to run a statewide campaign in California. On the socialism issue, you know, have not found that to be a problem at all. And usually my answer to that is something like, well, if by socialism you mean playing by the golden rule, you know, do unto others, you know, call it socialism, bring it on, you know. And I make the point that we're Greens, you know, we're not socialists, we're Greens, which is different in some technical ways, but if you look at our agendas, they're pretty much the same in terms of what we're calling for. So, you know, what I find the difference is more and more kind of the underlying mythologies, or call them ideologies if you like. We use slightly different terms, but we're basically talking about the same thing. As Greens, we try not to use technical terms, so that may be the difference, is that we just try to talk in everyday language that doesn't require you to know the meaning of special terms. Socialists put a lot of, they give a lot of respect to studying issues and learning a language of a political critique. And I've found it actually extremely useful and very helpful to know about. But when you're talking to people in the street, you know, the language might get in the way sometimes rather than help. So I try to avoid isms, and I make the point that, you know, I talk about where I'm coming from in my background and how I'm essentially have come here as a pragmatist, you know, to fix things, because they're pretty broken and they're almost becoming broken beyond repair. So it's really important for us to start fixing them. We've got the solutions. We have the public support. When you put together 37 million students who are indentured servants from the get-go, 1 out of every 2 people who are in poverty, 9 out of 10 jobs that do not pay decent wages going forward, 1 out of 3 men of color who are in prison on parole or probation. You got a world that's pretty broken for most people in this country now. So if we can start getting the word out and connecting and mobilizing. Last thing I want to say, I'm sorry, about fundraising, was that you really want to adopt the mindset that you're not fundraising for you, you're fundraising for the cause, and you're not really asking people for their money, but for their support in what other form they can give it. And when I make calls, fundraising calls, I actually think of them as mobilization calls. And I usually go through the pitch, and I usually start off with a line like, I'm calling you because I have incredibly exciting news to share. And then I go into the incredible opportunity of a lifetime in our race where we have the capacity to break through like never before in moving forward our movement, in giving our movement a voice. Because that movement is here and it's strong, and this is a race where we can potentially say what it is. If you can win it, all the better. This is a race we can really win and begin to move forward solutions to take back schools for strong communities, take back a business agenda which will grow strong local community-based businesses and worker-owned cooperatives or whatever. You want to have sort of a 2 or 3 sentence pitch about what you'll actually accomplish in this campaign, why it's so exciting. And then I usually say, after I do the campaign pitch, I usually say, I don't know if you're in a position to be able to contribute financially. If you can, that would be really terrific. We're trying to raise so much money by whenever, whatever. Or you don't have to put that in, depending on who you're talking to. But that's how I bring in the fundraising pitch. So that way I don't feel like I'm twisting arms. And I actually never call with a disciplinarian, right, or a buddy. I don't call with a buddy because I feel like it's between me and the donor. It's like an intimate conversation for me to tell people about what's really the big thing. What I am taking a year out of my life to do. It's really important, and you want to have made that very concise. But then you really want to focus in on that person. I sort of don't like having somebody near me to distract me from the person I'm talking to on the phone. I really want to be all about them for that 5 minutes, or maybe it's 3 minutes, or maybe it's 10 minutes. It's usually not more than 10 minutes. But I then, I try to make it my time with that person, and my pitch to them. It's a very soft pitch, so you don't get into this thing of hating to make fundraising calls because you put people on the spot. I never put people on the spot, and I actually never ask them how much they're going to contribute. And I never even ask them whether they're going to contribute, unless there's like a critical deadline and I have to raise $5,000 by 6 o'clock tonight. If there is a deadline like that, then I tell people, and that can be a real motivator. But in the absence of that, then I just say, it's this incredible opportunity of a lifetime breakthrough campaign. If you are in a position to be able to help financially, that would be really wonderful. If so, you can just go to my website and make a contribution there. If you can contribute $5, that's great. If you can contribute $500, that's great. Whatever you can contribute is really great. If you can't contribute money, although I don't usually say that, if they say I can't contribute money, then I'll say, well, that's, if they volunteer that, then I'll say that, no problem, don't worry about that. If you are able to contribute in some other way, that would be really wonderful. Here's how to get in touch with our volunteer coordinator or whatever. But if you, in your mind, don't feel like you're putting them in an uncomfortable position, then it's much easier to make the ask in a gracious and endearing way that will make them your contributor for the long haul. Okay.
Thanks. So Jill told you the very nice way to do campaign calls. Generally, what people will tell you is you make an ask. Can you donate $50? And then you don't say anything else, right? You just are silent. But, you know, some people may be less comfortable doing that. You probably will raise more money if you ask for a particular amount because maybe they don't know how much you need. Some things that help when I did my fundraising calls was to say, you know, we just put out a mailing to every single voter in the district, 10,000 people. That cost the campaign $4,000. Can you contribute $100 to help offset that? You know, just so people have a perspective, because it may be they have no idea how much campaigns cost, right? How many people know that sending out a mailing costs this thousands of dollars, right? And I have to say that no matter what, you should absolutely send out a mailing because as a Green Party candidate, you cannot count on the mainstream or lamestream media to communicate what your message is to the voter. Absolutely, you have to communicate that yourself. You have to be your own media, and the only way you can do that is through a mailing. So you need to mail 1 million people, right? And that would be 1.5 million, right? So gosh, what would that cost? That would be very expensive. But so maybe you can mail a subset of those people who are more likely to vote green, who always vote, you know, who are members of other organizations. One thing I would say, what? Yes, there you go. One thing I would definitely say is become a joiner. You know, join every organization you can before you announce your candidacy. All the organizations in your community, if you're religious, you know, like your synagogue or local congregation, you know, the environmental groups in Wisconsin, it's Clean Wisconsin, it's, you know, all these groups, because often they will send out an email to their membership. They might not necessarily give you their list, but they'll send out an email saying our member is running on an issue that we are working on. Ask them to do that. That goes into asking for endorsements. Endorsements can be so helpful. And sometimes, I mean, as a Green, I say go to all the friendly Democrats and ask for their endorsement. You know, they may not be courageous and endorse you, but they might give you their list of supporters. I actually had a couple Democrats say, I can't endorse you, but I'll give you my entire list, right, of 10,000 people in your district, and it says all their phone numbers and whether they donated to me and blah, 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 right? So ask for the endorsement first if they won't do it. No problem. Ask that they don't endorse your opponent. So ask for no endorsement in the race. If they say they've already endorsed your opponent, say, would you do a dual endorsement, right? Whatever you can do to negate that. If they won't do that, say, well, can I have your list of supporters? I'm not kidding. I had somebody who had endorsed my opponent and still gave me their list of supporters, right? Because their endorsements are political. They're not, people don't necessarily, especially career politicians, they don't always endorse the best person or the person they're even going to vote for. Sometimes it's they endorsed me or somebody who endorsed me endorsed this person. You know, there's a lot of games that go on. Endorsements are really important, and I say go out and ask the 100 most influential people in your race for their endorsement. Whether you have any chance at all, you know, you still ask for it because you're a serious candidate who plans on winning, and the other candidates ask for those endorsements, and you should too, right? It matters. People talk about that kind of thing. So if you get their lists, great. You can call through those lists. Same things with unions, with groups like the Sierra Club, other groups like that. It's crucial to build up your list and your email lists, and you can do that through endorsements. Also, it's easier to raise money if you can say, I was endorsed by the former mayor, or I was endorsed by the city council person or the school board person. There are a lot of people out there who hold public office who the establishment candidates don't think are important, so they never get asked for their endorsement. If you ask them, you know, maybe they'll be flattered, or maybe they'll think you're the best candidate because you are, and they'll endorse you, right? They won't play games. The other thing about emails and fundraising, deadlines are great, like what Jill said. There are deadlines in campaigns. There's usually 2 where you have a filing deadline. Do not let that go by without raising a ton of money off the filing deadline. You can always say the filing deadline is 24 or 48 hours from now. We want to have a strong showing, so this is the time, if you haven't donated before, to donate now. That's really important. And carry around with you printed, self-addressed envelopes everywhere you go. If anybody talks to you and says, hey, good job, I'm glad you're running, pull the envelope out of your pocket and hand it to them. You have to do that, right? Because they're not going to go to your website, maybe, or maybe they'll just forget. But if they have the envelope, you're much more likely to get a check in the mail. Also with fundraising, you have to keep incredible documentation of all the money you receive. So make sure you have a treasurer who you trust, who is excellent. Photocopy the checks before they deposit them. That can be a real nightmare after the campaign or during your filing deadline if you don't have photocopies and documentation of all this stuff. So, anything else?
Let's see. Nothing that comes to my mind at the moment. Do people want to just, are we?
Yeah. So we're at time. Any other questions, comments?
So maybe put up hands and let's just make sure we get a stack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Yeah, so maybe we could hear all the questions first and then we'll comment. Yeah, I think you were first actually. Go
I
ahead.
just had something to add about the treasurer.
Okay. Yep.
There's a guy, and I know one guy that I'm using, who's a professional treasurer, and it's not very expensive. It's like $250 a quarter or whatever, and he takes all the liability and
Wow.
does all the reporting for you. So
Great.
you don't have to worry about going to jail or
Yeah.
having fines and things like that, because it's
Yeah.
happened in California.
Sure.
So
That's great to know. Okay. Yeah, over here.
So how do you keep up like your energy or momentum when you're trying to fundraise? Because if you're trying to raise like all that money, it can be daunting. So like, how do you keep like the courage to keep going?
We'll come back to that. Let's just I want to just get all the questions out. That's a great question.
A question about endorsements from nonprofits. They can't really endorse the political candidates. So how do you do that?
Great. Okay. Yep.
I'm too old to run as a candidate, don't have the energy, I'm afraid of it. But I'm very interested in building the Green Party through running candidates. As a peace activist, I've been cut off at the knees. And I see a campaign as a way to make this political, but as forming a campaign committee to find a candidate. And then, build a Green Party chapter, build the Green Party through a candidate who's, represents the message you're getting across.
Great. Great point. Yeah.
How do you manage your ongoing strategies and your progress towards that? You mentioned, it's campaigns are often progressing,
Yeah.
developing. How do you make sure everybody stays on
Great.
on that task, and how do you manage that?
Great. Okay. Good question. Yeah.
I think looking back, I think you did an excellent campaign, given the
Thank you.
resource and money you have.
Thank
I was wondering,
you.
did you ever come up with a list of things that you could have done better,
Mhm.
weaknesses and
Yeah. Yeah. Great. All right. We will try to come back to that. Okay. Yep.
This is just a comment having just recently run in California. I'd recommend if you have enough funds, and they're not expensive, but you should bring on board a professional campaign consultant. One of the things they can add to the pie is they're very well connected to the
politically. So for endorsements, I had some sizable endorsements from Labour, from firefighters, you know,
Wow.
and these introductions came through his relationship after him got me into the interview process.
Great. Exciting. Okay, other comments? Okay, I think we got them all. Do you want to jump in, or
Sure.
Sean?
Okay.
So the first one was just keeping your energy up with the fundraising or in nonprofit endorsements.
Sure. Okay, so keeping your energy up, you know, because you created a plan of how much you need to raise each week, each hour, exactly what you need to raise. So you may be like, oh my gosh, I got to raise $40,000 for this campaign, but today I only need to raise $200, right? That makes it much more digestible, and people will give you money. People donate to campaigns. They just absolutely will, especially if you're calling through voters. And so talking to people is energizing. Being a candidate, if you've got the rest of the stuff taken care of and you have an excellent campaign manager who is doing what somebody asked, which is keeping people in line, which is what the campaign manager should be doing, then it's energizing because everybody actually tells you it's great what you're doing, thank you for helping me, you know, all these things, which is like kind of makes you feel good about what you're doing. It's rare that somebody tells you to your face that they don't like you or they're not going to vote for you.
And the nonprofit endorsements.
Nonprofits, they have C4s that are separate, the big ones do, that can do endorsements. Or you can get the leaders as individuals, so the president of this nonprofit endorsed you, and you can say, they know it's as an individual, but people still respect and like that person and associate them with the nonprofit. Let's see, what's this?
Building the party.
Through finding candidates.
Right, not wanting to run yourself.
Right. So if you don't want to run yourself, you shouldn't run, right? It's not easy being a candidate. It requires a certain type of personality where you just want to go up and talk to total strangers all day, right? If that's not you, and you can't take orders from your campaign manager, which is, you have to be that kind of person who will just, if the campaign manager says, do this, say this, you can do that. So I would say if you're looking for somebody, you want to find somebody who's well respected in the community, who's relevant to the particular office. So if it's sheriff, a former police officer, or somebody in that criminal justice injustice system, right? If it's for school board, you absolutely have to be a teacher. It's like pretty much you have to, otherwise, because the people running against you are going to be teachers or principals or something like that. You should look for people who are not afraid to be progressive, who have strong organizational ties, say the president of the neighborhood association. These are the type of people you should approach to run for office.
Yeah, and the success of a campaign, you know, when people are first starting out, you know, depends a lot on the team. It really depends on the team. And if you run candidates where you already have a Green Party local chapter, it's going to be much better and much stronger, because as Greens, we generally don't have deep pockets. So we can't hire our campaign. You can't hire the dream campaign. You've got to have people who come forward and volunteer, who are willing to do the door knocking, you know, to distribute flyers and so on. You want people who are connected. So as state parties, you know, it really helps for the party to target areas where the party already exists or where there's an activist or two. If you've got two activists, you have a quorum. If you only have one, it's very hard for one person to generate waves in their community. But if you have two or more, you know, suddenly, you know, you really get to blast off. And if in addition you already have a local, that's great. But even if you don't have a local chapter, where you can kind of harness a campaign with the development of a local, that's really exciting, and that would be a high priority area to target. As Greens, we used to think that all we had to do was get celebrities to run for us, you know, and Right. Well, I think we learned that, we're all celebrities on this bus. And, that what really counts for us is commitment, understanding, credibility, and a track record. And it's not the track record, of being in the movies and on TV. It's the track record of working in your community and for your community. And that's, that at the end of the day is really a very powerful strategy, I think, that we're starting to see local chapters and candidates run with all over the country in a way that's really exciting. In terms of keeping people on the same page, because campaigns really are a moving target, that is very much, in a way, it's the job of your campaign manager. Your job as a candidate is to keep talking to people and to keep talking to the press, especially, and to keep getting the message out and fundraising. You want your job to be really simple. It's basically message, message, message all the time to the key sources, donors, voters, but especially press to get it out to voters. And as far as keeping the campaign team together, you talk to the campaign manager, you're probably not going to talk to hardly anybody else. If you do, you're not talking to the people you need to be talking to. It's helpful for the team to meet, but sometimes it's more helpful for the campaign manager just to be talking to people. So you need to be in touch with your campaign manager about changes in strategy or new opportunities that you want to, new avenues to go down. If there seems to be interest in the labor community, you may need to huddle about how you're going to try to bring organized labor in, try to appear at more labor events. So you'll be constantly determining your schedule and your appearances. That is very much a moving target. But people sort of have to get with the program before the gun goes off. And when the race starts, everybody knows their job, and you just run as fast as you can to try to get to the finish line, knowing that when you're at the finish line, you're at another starting line. And we don't, we really try not to burn through people and not to burn through your volunteers, especially, or anybody else, because we regard running campaigns as community building. And it doesn't end on election day, and it doesn't begin on your announcement day. Things get more intense, and they get into a certain kind of special vehicle that can give you a lot of legs. But we're really in this for the long haul. And lessons learned, that's a great idea, and we are trying to do that. We are still learning those lessons, and we're still dealing with our FEC obligations. If you take public money, little do you know it, but there's a whole after campaign. So, oh boy, thank you. So we're very busy still running out our responsibilities with the campaign, but we very much do hope to put together lessons learned. Part of the reason we're running these campaign schools is because this is one of the immediate lessons, is that we need to get more people on the ground right now at the local level. The biggest lesson of all is that we have won. In the court of public opinion, people are dropping out, by the droves from establishment politics, and they're looking for a new place to go. That is the biggest lesson of all, is that there is a victory that's waiting to happen on the ground in your district. We just have to know the rules of the road. They're not easy. It requires some learning. You got to do it a few times before you get those tools down. We need more people like Sarah and Ben, who are not only fabulous candidates, but they actually know how to run campaigns too. It's harder to find a good campaign manager than it is to find a good candidate. Candidates are a dime a dozen compared to campaign managers. So you don't have to be a candidate in order to really change the world and build the movement. By being a behind-the-scenes person and doing what campaign managers need to do, you can make all the difference in the world. So there's a role for all of us, and thank you for being here to help us all make it happen. Thank you so much.